Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Florence, to the third edition of the WORLD in Florence Festival. As you already know, the festival is a project that extends across 5 years, 2021-2025, which arises from the experience of over 30 years of the Romualdo del Bianco Foundation on the themes of travel, heritage and the environment for intercultural dialogue in an era of great change. Looking back at the past editions of the scientific program of the event, the Learning Journey, Places and Cultures in Transition, the first edition in 2021 was based on the challenges of the COVID pandemic, trying to understand its impact and what we could learn from it. As for the second edition in 2022, in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the World Heritage Convention and the 40 years of Florence as part of the World Heritage List, it was conceived with the generous support of Francesco Bandarin and ICROM, in particular Joseph King and Aparna Tandon, and delved into the issues of heritage, including its new definitions and its relationship with conflicts and climate change. This year, for the third edition, we focused our attention on issues relating to travel for cultural reasons, which often reduces the commodification of services into mere tourism and sometimes results in over-tourism, going on to investigate such challenges and bringing successful practices to the attention. I am Corinna Del Bianco, member of the board of the Romualdo Del Bianco Foundation, whom I thank, together with the president, Carlotta Del Bianco, and I had the honor of coordinating the scientific committee of the festival that I represent here, together with myself, Aurora Savelli, professor of early modern history at the University of Naples L'Orientale, and Giorgio von Arx, consultant of the Life Beyond Tourism movement. On behalf of the entire committee, I extend a great and sincere thank you to the honorary president of the Romualdo Del Bianco Foundation, Professor Munir Bushnaki, archaeologist, special advisor to the UNESCO Director General and to the ICROM Director General, and to the President Emeritus, Paolo Del Bianco, for their constant enlightening guidance. And to all the scientific collaborations, in particular, who are fundamental for the creation of the program. Francesco Bandarin, architect, Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Culture, 2010-2018. Aparna Tandon, ICROM Senior Program Leader, First Aid and Resilience for Cultural Heritage in Time of Crisis, with the invaluable ICROM staff, Joy Ambani, Mohona Chaturri, and Zoe van den Hende. Fergus McLaren, President of the ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on Cultural Tourism. And last but not least, Maria Teresa Iaquinta, ICOMOS Italy Secretary General, Scientific Committee of the Association of the Foundation of the International University of the Mediterranean Sea, with whom we have a profound and long-lasting relationship. And to all the speakers on the program, each person brought suggestions, advice, and knowledge that were invaluable elements in creating the program as you see it today. The program of the Learning Journey, Tourism, Unraveling Challenges, Exploring Solutions, contains a series of different meetings and debates, including the keynotes, as today by Professor Munir Bushnaki and Francesco Bandarin, and tomorrow by Jazir Al-Herbish, CEO of the Saudi Arabia Heritage Committee, and by Fergus McLaren, President of ICOMOS Cultural Tourism Committee. Then we have two scientific panels. The first one will be this morning and will be coordinated by Maria Teresa Iaquinta. And its aim is to theoretically address the old and new challenges of tourism. Tourism, especially in heritage contexts, has always existed. And with Gilles Bertrand, Professor of Modern History at the University of Grenoble-Alpes, we will retrace its origins. It is also an element that we know has particular impact on the environment. Therefore, with Tim Fairhurst, Secretary General of ETOA, the European Tourism Association, we will observe the actions and policies of the European Union to reduce its emissions. We will then go through the sustainability of tourism development between under and over tourism, with Jan van der Borg, professor at KU Leuven and at Ca' Foscari in Venice. Finally, we will attempt to identify the salient issues in contexts that have been destroyed due to conflicts or environmental catastrophes, with Aparna Tandon. The second panel will take place tomorrow afternoon, and we will be coordinated by Aparna Tandon. And this panel will bring to light 4 case studies. We will start with the Pearling Path of Bahrain, with Sheikh Ibrahim Al Khalifa, an interim director of the Arab Regional Center for World Heritage. Then we will go to Tunisia, with the case of Djerba and the great south of Tunisia, with Hajer Krimi of the Tunisian Ministry of Cultural Affairs. Then we will move to Madagascar, with a project from tourism to traditional fishing, with Paul Ention of the NGO Blue Ventures. And finally, we will conclude with the Historic Center of Florence, with the director of the UNESCO World Heritage Office, Carlo Francini. We will then have a narration experience by Sue Hill between community, art, traditional activities, and invasive tourism, with the Eden Project in Cornwall, in the United Kingdom. Then we will have other moments, today and tomorrow, dedicated to the cultural storytelling. That are moments of narration of local realities that you see also in the Phygital exhibition, taking places conscious territories and itineraries, directly from our young participants, online and in presence, with 24 narrations from 15 countries. These moments will be coordinated by the ICROM team with Julian Bani, Mohona Chatbury, and Zoe van den Hende. And many other moments we will have of meeting, discussion, debates, including afternoon and evening events. As we saw yesterday evening with the night conference show by Duccio Canestrini, Homo Touristicus Evolution, to the screening of the documentary Prime Meridian of Wine, directed by the Georgian director Nana Georgadze, winner of numerous prizes, to the tasting of Georgian wines, to the jazz concert tomorrow evening, organized alongside the Honorary Consulate of Czech Republic for Tuscany and the ARCA Association, with the Luigi Cherubini Conservatory of Florence. Unfortunately, the Nigerian group Splendid Tunes and Amazing Graces Voices of Ibadan will not be able to be with us as we were hoping, as they were unable to reach us to the issue because of issues related to the visa. In the online and paper program, you will find all the details of the scheduled activities, as well as the biographical details of all speakers and all the abstracts. Finally, with an aim to consolidate the work done over the past 3 years with many international experts and to effectively contribute to the development of the territories with a specific tool, the event will end with our signing of the Life Beyond Tourism Guidelines for the Sustainable Development of Territories towards the 2030 Agenda and beyond. I thank everyone for the participation in drafting this document, which is still in its draft stage and which we will continue to improve in the upcoming days. This document will be then available and be a public tool accessible online from both the Foundation and the Movement website. I thank you again for being part of this edition, everyone adding their own contribution and testimony. Thank you. I now call Professor Munir Bushnaki on the stage. Thank you.
Grazie. Buongiorno a tutti. Good morning. It is a great honor and a real pleasure to be again here in Florence, this marvelous city of Tuscany and of Italy, with all friends and colleagues of the Del Bianco Foundation. I must say that I remember my first visit to President Paolo Del Bianco when he received the Galonfano di Argento della città di Firenze. E da questo tempo, mi sembra che era 2006, abbiamo avuto un lungo cammino di cooperazione, di collaborazione tra l'ICROM e la Fondazione Del Bianco, tra l'UNESCO e la Fondazione Del Bianco. Io sono contento oggi di vedere il mio amico collega Francesco Vandarin. Con Francesco Vandarin abbiamo avuto sempre la stessa visione, la stessa direzione di lavoro su il patrimonio culturale e la relazione con il turismo e particolarmente con il turismo culturale. So I shift to English for my colleagues and friends who are not Italian speaking. I want to say a big greetings to the president of the Saudi Administration for Cultural Heritage, Dr. Jasir. I am really pleased to see how Saudi Arabia has, during the last years, developed a very heavy program directed to protection of cultural heritage, promotion of cultural heritage, and diffusion of cultural heritage. And you all know that this year, Saudi Arabia was the president of the World Heritage Committee, and that the World Heritage Committee took place in Riyadh for 15 days, and it was a great success with thousands of participants coming from all the world. Having a delegation from Saudi Arabia to Florence, it's a participation showing now the interest of a number of countries, particularly from the Arab world, dealing with the vision expressed a few years ago here in Florence by the foundation, and in particular by President of the foundation up to 2 years ago, and then from Carlotta, my dear friend Carlotta, President, congratulations, you and the scientific member of the board, Corina, for your very important work in the scientific approach to what was the idea, what was the feeling that your father has had about a new vision of tourism. not a classical vision of tourism. And I was always telling him, what you are bringing is something which should be understood by everyone, because it's not easy to launch an idea of life beyond tourism. What it means? What means the tourism for dialogue? And now we see more and more a lot of tour operators, a lot of institutions, universities, at Sorbonne, as you know, Gravari Barbas, in your university, Politecnico Milano, the idea of developing a new approach for tourism. And this is why we are here today. And I want to also say that my dear friend Hayat Gattat is represented by a bright archaeologist from Tunisia, Hajar Krimi, and it's good also to know that a country like Tunisia, having such a rich heritage from antiquity, Phoenician period, Carthaginian period, Roman period, Byzantine period, Islamic period, can give to the people. Yesterday, I liked one very important word by the deputy mayor of Florence: knowledge. The knowledge of the other. This was one of the themes of UNESCO during the last years. We can avoid wars, we can avoid crises, we can avoid misunderstanding if we know the other. And by which way we know the other is knowing its culture, its history, its past, its values. So I am, again, very, very pleased to be present to this session where we are concentrating more on a very important topic called Luoghi Parlanti. And I wish to this session and to all the delegates coming from different countries also. From yesterday we met our colleagues from Democratic Republic of Congo, from Cameroon. This is another very important opening to the African continent towards the development of new relations and doing the key word of Paolo Del Bianco, dialogue for peace. Thank you very much. And now I have the pleasure to ask my friend and colleague, Dr. Jazir, to come and say a few words of welcome from Saudi Arabia. تفضل.
شكرا دكتور. Assalamu alaikum. If I have time, I try to teach you how to speak Arabic, but it is a really not easy task. So at least you know some of the words like Assalamu alaikum, marhaba, but I apologize to speak in English because I don't speak Italian. I understand little. And really thank you for the warm invitation from Professor Munir, Dr. Paolo, and the amazing team. And I'm really glad when I came here 2 days ago and find what we always call the Open Museum in Florence. And what is really interesting, when we met the team yesterday morning, and then we spent almost an hour at the foundation, and we found immediately possible cooperation, either in archaeology, in built heritage, in handicrafts, and other areas. And allow me, I just want to use the few seconds that I have just to say thank you, first of all, and to just introduce in brief what is Heritage Commission in Saudi Arabia and Ministry of Culture. We are an organization 5 years old, but work in heritage in Saudi Arabia started very early, 1950s, 1960s, with the help from international experts, especially Italians. And we have 5 major areas, as we discussed. We have archaeology, built heritage, handcrafts, intangible heritage, and world heritage. And we just concluded celebration of 50 years convention, the 1972, and also 20 years for the ICH, the Intangible Cultural Heritage. And we are active in other conventions like the Underwater and the 1954 and the 2005, which is we are establishing new centers and new initiatives. And we think through our first edition of participation this year, we will come up with ideas for next year. We like to bring more people, maybe more stakeholders, like our colleagues from Al-Ula, dell'i, and other companies. And we really extend our thanks to the organizers who invited us. I'm sure we will end up with a very good program with the support and advice from our common friend, Dr. Francesco Bandrian, who is always supporting. And we think we can reach a really practical relation between Heritage Commission and the Foundation to help both sides. We want to start immediately on the residency program, for example, for handicraft, also for the restoration program. We extend the invitation to the team, to Doctor, and the rest of the foundation to visit Saudi Arabia and to participate in our events. I really appreciate the time. I'm already done with my time. Appreciate the time and the opportunity. And we will be with you today and tomorrow. The team will help and give any information that you think you need. I conclude by the word dialogue, when you emphasized yesterday on the dialogue. And as my colleagues know, and Francesco definitely knows, that when Ministry of Culture was founded almost 6 years ago, it has 3 major pillars. And we announce this almost every day. The first pillar is culture as economical support or economical pillar. And the second one is culture as a way of life. But listen to the third one. The third one is culture as international dialogue. So we are exactly have this overlap, same concept, same objectives of having culture, especially heritage as a dialogue. And Francesco already know that in one field in Saudi Arabia, like North or South Saudi Arabia, any place, you go there and you find Saudi, Italian, French, Japanese working on international missions, doing some scientific work. So it's the best example of dialogue that we are supporting, and we will be happy to do more with you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا سعادة الدكتور. هذا الكلمة الطيبة. I can say some words in Arabic because we have some people present here speaking Arabic. It was a very important message that we received now from Dr. Jasser, and I'm sure that this first session will be followed by a long way of collaboration and cooperation. Madame Krimi, Sayyida Krimi من تونس. Madame Krimi is an archaeologist and she is from the Ministry of Culture of Tunisia. تفضلي.
Merci. Bonjour, buongiorno, good morning. Thank you. C'est avec beaucoup d'émotion, et quand on a donc ces émotions à exprimer, on choisit toujours la langue la plus facile pour nous. Mi dispiace, parlo un po' italiano, ma non sufficientemente per dire la mia gioia di essere con voi oggi. Je suis très contente, je me réjouis de cette présence. Au début, d'abord, je dois transmettre les salutations de Madame la ministre, Madame Haït-Aqtat, qui devait venir, mais pour des empêchements majeurs, donc m'a chargée de cette mission. Et je vous transmets donc tous ces souhaits de succès pour cet événement. Tous ces remerciements vont à la Fondation, au président et bien sûr à la présidente aujourd'hui, Madame Carlotte, et au fondateur, Monsieur Paolo, son président honorifique, Monsieur Mounir Bouchnaqi, et à tous les présents ici, tous les participants en qui j'ai quelques connaissances et quelques amitiés. Donc la Tunisie souhaite exprimer donc son soutien à toute cette initiative qui, pour nous, émane de la société civile. Et la société civile en Tunisie a sa place. La società civile in Tunisia lavora da tanti anni nel domaine del patrimonio et del tourisme. Le tourisme et le patrimoine sont aujourd'hui l'affaire de la société civile en Tunisie par la loi. Ils sont devenus par la loi des partenaires qui sont au même pied d'égalité avec la participation de l'État. Aujourd'hui, je voulais bien sûr présenter un cas de succès. On ne peut pas parler de débat, de dialogue, imposer un dialogue sans avoir déjà un résultat. Nous avons déjà un résultat qui s'impose aujourd'hui en Tunisie et qui va changer dans les prochaines années notre vision au tourisme culturel et à la valorisation du patrimoine. Le cas de Djerba dans le sud tunisien, une petite île avec un tourisme de masse qui a entraîné toute une région défavorisée et l'a fait introduire dans un grand circuit, le circuit donc du tourisme culturel et uniquement le tourisme culturel, tout en gardant donc son statut de tourisme de masse et qui fait diffuser donc le message à travers ce cas d'étude. Donc aujourd'hui, le débat, j'ai vu donc les interventions, c'est un débat très fructueux. Nous souhaitons donc exprimer nos opinions et nos points de vue donc de l'autre côté de la Méditerranée. Et si on est là, c'est pour apprendre et aussi pour exposer nos expériences. Encore nos encouragements et merci pour l'invitation. Merci à vous tous. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Klimi. For those who are not fluent in French, Madame Klimi wanted to express her thanks. I do like yesterday when you were translating the synthesis of all the speeches in the round table. She is expressing her thanks and expressed also the message from Her Excellency, the Minister of Culture of Tunisia, Mrs. Hayat Gattat, and saying that by law, Tunisia has now given a place to the civil society. And this is important because this is opening the field of cooperation and collaboration, particularly in cultural heritage. She also mentioned the fact that the term dialogue that was expressed also by our Dr. Jassir and also as one of the fundamental theme of the foundation, dialogue is present in one island in Tunisia, which is called Djerba. Djerba was inscribed this year in Riyadh as a World Heritage Site of Tunisia, and it is a place where she will make a statement on this issue, where dialogue is and will be one of the elements of international collaboration. I don't want to be too long, but I think this is the synthesis of what you said. Shukran, Ukht Hajer.
Thank you.
Before I give the floor to Simone, I cannot forget that if we are all here, it's because of him. Simone is working day and night, and I can testify because I don't sleep a lot, and sometimes in the night I see message from Simone. In the night, not to speak about the day. Grazie mille, caro segretario generale Simone.
Grazie. So, good morning, everyone. What to say after such a Georgios presentation? So, I would like to inform that now there are 3 short videos of 3 friends of us representing 3 important international organizations that every year don't miss to send us their message of appreciation for the mission of the festival and the activity of the foundation. So I would like to invite to screen the first video greeting message by Director General of ICROM, one of the most important and outstanding consulting organization of UNESCO, Dr. Weber Endoro. Please, thank you.
The honorable board members of the Raimundo de la Bianco Foundation, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, I would like to thank the organizers of the festival and particularly our long-standing partner, Della Foundation, for continuing to promote dialogue and allowing us to come together to reflect on the most important topics of the contemporary world, which have a profound impact on our heritage. I take cue from the recent discussions of the 33rd session of the ICROM General Assembly held in Rome in early November. Our keynote speaker, Gegeleme Joseph, an esteemed architect and ebonist, has brought to light a theme that resonates with this year's theme of the festival. In her address, she underscores the profound connection between heritage and migration, emphasizing how migration has played a pivotal part in shaping the rich cultural tapestry of countless communities and groups. I believe myself that migration has been part and parcel of the world's history and heritage. Today's world was shaped, in most cases, by migration. There is no population which did not migrate. She also said, we have a key in heritage to look at the past, to help us unpack the present, and from the space of the present, of understanding better what happens today, how do we project a more constructive future for everybody. Human mobility has woven a rich tapestry of heritage, where cultures and traditions intertwine across the globe. The trends of our shared history are intricately connected throughout the movement of people, creating a mosaic that reflects the diversity and interconnectedness of our global society. Yet, we delve into this theme, we also cannot ignore the challenges which human mobility imposes on today's global world. Not only includes migration flows, but also tourism, a phenomenon which has gained immense popularity, but at times comes at a cost. In Florence, the impact of mass tourism is well known. Alongside, of course, the economic gains, it also brings environmental issues, impact also to our local monuments, and disruptions in the normal functions of communities. How many other places in Italy and worldwide witness this phenomenon? The footprints of millions of eager wanderers, though well-intentioned, can leave scars on the landscape of our heritage. The delicate balance between managing our heritage and managing the influx of travelers demands our attention. Here we find an opportunity to reflect on the role of effective management of heritage. These processes not only safeguard our invaluable heritage assets, but guide us towards a more sustainable world. May this festival become a nourishing ground, cultivating ideas, a melting pot of perspectives, and a catalyst for change. Together, let us embark on a journey towards a future where heritage is not just about the past, but a guiding force for a sustainable world. Thank you.
Thanks again to Dr. Weber and Doro, and let me also use this occasion to thank the staff of ICROM, who is heavily contributing to our festival, starting from Aparna, who will deliver a keynote, and the gentle group of Jui, Mohona, and Zoe, who will help us in coordinating the session dedicated to the presentations of the cultural storytelling. Let's now screen the second video of another organization most important in the field of heritage, conservation and protection, and who is a friend of the foundation with an agreement we signed a long time. And is Madam Teresa Patricio, the president of ICOMOS International, is another consulting body of UNESCO. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, ICOMOS is pleased to again give its patronage to the 2023 edition of the International Festival of Cultural Expressions, the World in Florence, organized by our long-standing friends at the Romuald Del Bianco Foundation. The theme you will explore under the heading of tourism, unraveling challenges, exploring solutions, are particularly close to ICOMOS' actual concerns. During the event, you will hear a keynote speech from Fergus McLaren, that is the president of the ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on Cultural Tourism. This ICOMOS committee was founded as early as 1969, and ICOMOS has always been conscious of tourism's profound effects, both positive and negative, on heritage sites and local communities in the World Heritage context and beyond. Following on from its previous versions, adopted as early as 1976 and then in 1999, ICOMOS in 2022 adopted a new International Cultural Heritage Tourism Charter. It is already ICOMOS' most translated doctrinal document, with other languages versions in production. Its aim is to achieve responsible and regenerative tourism, placing cultural heritage preservation, enjoyment and access, as well as the well-being of communities as the central guiding priorities for fair and balanced tourism management. The intention now is to ensure that the new charter is adopted and used as widely as possible, both by ICOMOS members and beyond. We hope you will support us in this objective. And in that regard, I wanted to thank the Romuald Del Bianco Foundation for hosting the meeting of our Scientific Committee on Cultural Tourism in Florence in 2017, as this is where the drafting of this new charter started. I wish you a successful event and fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Madam Teresa Patricio. And now, last but not least, another important partners of the Foundation, we move to Africa. And I am delighted to introduce the greeting message by the Honorable Secretary General of the UCLGA, Union of Cities and Local Communities of Africa, just to confirm how much important is to approach this continent and launching and confirming the importance of the message of mutual knowledge from cultural point of view and dialogue, also with this part of the world. So the screen of let's screen the message of Mr. Jean-Pierre Longuembassy. Merci.
Je souhaite, en tant que secrétaire général des cités et gouvernements locaux unis d'Afrique, tout le succès qu'il mérite au 3e festival des lieux parlants de Florence. Je dois avouer que j'aurais bien voulu y être, parce que ce que fait Florence en matière de réhabilitation de la culture par le tourisme est quelque chose qui nous inspire. Et c'est pour ça que CIGE et le gouvernement locaux unis d'Afrique a signé un accord de partenariat avec la Fondation. Et je pense que cet accord a déjà donné des résultats, puisque une partie de ce que nous faisons dans la célébration de la capitale africaine de la culture est inspirée de ce que Florence a fait. Mais nous voulions aller plus loin. Nous avons, à l'heure actuelle, engagé une réflexion sur les chemins de ce que Florence a tracé, comment labelliser les lieux pour que ces lieux soient porteurs de mémoire vivante de la ville et magnifient le travail de création fait par les artistes, par les professionnels de la culture, et fasse en sorte que l'identité de la ville soit mieux connue. Lorsque vous dédiez ce festival à la mobilité et à ses impacts sur l'image de la ville et l'image de ses créateurs, vous êtes sur les pas de ce que nous voudrions suivre. Il se trouve que la première capitale africaine de la culture, Rabat, a posé les bases d'une réflexion sur ce plan-là. Et nous sommes en train de commencer les discussions avec la deuxième capitale africaine de la culture, qui sera probablement une capitale conjointe, Brazzaville et Kinshasa, pour 2024 et 2025. Et nous aimerions avoir la Fondation à nos côtés pour faire progresser la réflexion sur les lieux de culture, la relation avec le tourisme et le vivre ensemble.
Secretary General Jean-Pierre Longen-Bassi. And now let's start with the key speeches, and I would like again to invite our honorary president, Mr. Munir Bushnaki, to deliver his presentation, The Talking Places. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much. We just have a glass of... Excellency, President of Del Bianco Foundation, my dear friend Carlotta Del Bianco, Excellency Paolo Del Bianco, Emeritus President of the Foundation, dear Secretary General Simone Giometti, Excellencies, experts, professors from all countries and institutions like ICROM present here in Florence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to participate to the third edition of the 2023 magnificent festival, Florence in the World and the World in Florence. It is launched, as it was said by Professor Corina, by the Fondazione del Bianco in 2021 with a specific project called Luoghi Parlanti. I quote, Luoghi Parlanti is a service created by the Life Beyond Movement Tourism Travel to Dialogue as a storytelling tool of the territories to implement that attractiveness and access to visitors. This project stands as an itinerant experience that invites this discovery and intervenes on the territories to create a deeper bond and authentic knowledge and a bond directly with the local community. It is a 5-year program, as it was said, that will bring together theory and practice, students, institutions, and companies, generating intercultural and intergenerational dialogue in the setting of the city of Florence, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982. And here, just a personal record. I was here in Florence in 1982 when the city was inscribed on the World Heritage List, and there was a seminar organized by the mayor of Florence at that time, Florence, City of History and Arts.
1982.
Huh?
84.
82. I was then at UNESCO in charge of cultural heritage for the what we called at that time at UNESCO, we called the program International Campaigns for the Safeguarding of Cultural Heritage. And the campaigns that I was following in these years was Venice campaign, which started in the 60s, but also Carthage, but also Fez, Medina of Fez, Havana, Cuba, etc. So this was one of the program of UNESCO in the 80s, which was going on up to the end of the 90s. In my intervention last year, during the opening session on the 15th November 2022, I expressed my opinion about this new approach promoted by my colleagues and friends of the Del Bianco Foundation, which considers the visited territories begin to be perceived not as a simple travel destination, but a place which turns tourists to temporary residents of good places they visit. And the theme of this year's festival is heritage, travel, and peaceful coexistence among people in relation to mobility and over-tourism, in line with the 2022 topic. And of course, we cannot forget that we are, unfortunately, in this period, in the middle of such terrible crisis, whether in the Middle East or in Europe. And it is so important to have such a meeting speaking about the importance of peaceful coexistence. During the years 1997 to 2003, the date of the adoption in Paris of the UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, UNESCO has done a lengthy quest for the recognition and of the function and the values of living cultural expression and practices. I was, in this year, 2003, in charge with my colleagues of preparing the convention of 2003 and speaking in particular about one example of a space which was later recognized as a World Heritage Intangible Space. It is called in Morocco, in Marrakesh, Jama' al-Fna, the Mosque of al-Fna. This was exactly a living example, what we call today Luoghi Parlanti. Jama' al-Fna is one of the main cultural spaces in Marrakesh and has become one of the symbols of the city since its foundation in the 11th century. It represents a unique concentration of popular Moroccan cultural traditions performed through musical, religious, artistic expressions. As you know, intangible cultural heritage, and it's just, we have to repeat it because it's important to know, is defined as the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural space associated with it that communities, groups, and in some cases individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. Intangible cultural heritage is then transmitted from generation to generation, constantly recreated by groups in response to their environment, their interaction with nature and the history, providing them with a sense of identity and continuity. In the Luoghi Parlanti, prime consideration is given to those examples of intangible heritage which promote mutual respect among communities, groups, and individuals, as well as the principle of responsible and sustainable development. According to the available literature, and in particular by the authors Evaristus Irandu and Parita Shah, in their book entitled Conservation of Natural and Cultural Heritage in Kenya, cultural heritage tourism is the hottest trend in the tourism industry. Cultural heritage sites do not have only intrinsic beauty and value, they are among the key assets for tourism. Cultural heritage and tourism enjoy a special symbiotic relationship with each other and with each enriching the other. The meaning refers to the social and psychological practices upon which the people or society understand and interpret the world around them. The definition is adopted because of its emphasis on the intangible aspect of culture, which defines cultural heritage tourism as traveling experience, the places and activities that authentically represent the story and people of the past and the present. It can be argued that cultural heritage tourism includes historic buildings and monuments, the sites of important events. According to the World Heritage Convention now, 1972, it includes both tangible and intangible aspects. Some examples show how much the storytelling is originating from the monuments themselves. Yesterday I was speaking with my colleague, Mrs. Krimi, who is an archaeologist. When we were students with some of our professors, common professors, we were asked that when you are doing an excavation and you are discovering some stones, some inscriptions, some mosaics, they are speaking to you. So there is something that is called Luoghi Parlanti in archaeology that we knew for many, many years. The same is done by an article written by Fausto Sarmiento, Edwin Bergbaum, Jessica Brown, Jane Lennon, and Sue Ferry, Managing Cultural Use and Features, published in July this year, where it is written, sacred sites are viewed and revered in a multiplicity of ways, for example, as center of the cosmos, places of power, abodes of deities, ancestors and spirits, source of water, life and other blessings, symbol of identity, places of revelation, contemplation and inspiration. Some sacred sites can be places created by humans, such as Machu Picchu. I can show one picture of Rapa Nui. I am going to give you very quickly some examples that I lived during my career. I'm not making something theoretical, but what I lived personally when I went to Machu Picchu, the statues of Rapa Nui, and also other places. I was involved in following up a project for protecting these sites in a very far island belonging to Chile, and where we have these statues, and there is no inscription, there is no text, it's only the statues that you have to look at and try to understand what they are providing you, which meaning they have. This is one of the experiments. I want also to mention Mostar. I worked a lot in Bosnia-Herzegovina following the disaggregation of former Yugoslavia and the terrible damage to the historic city, and in particular to the famous bridge of the Neretva. Here you see the picture of the destruction of the bridge in Mostar in 1993. The reconstruction of the old bridge of the city of Mostar is considered by UNESCO as a symbol of reconciliation, international cooperation, and of the coexistence of diverse cultural, ethnic, and religious communities. When I was in Mostar, there was after the war, in 1993, there was two municipalities, one called Mostar East, one called Mostar West. When I spoke to the two mayors, East and West, and I obtained as a proposal for what UNESCO can do with you, they said, let's do the restoration of the bridge, because this is going to put again the population all together. There was a terrible crisis between Christians, Catholic, Orthodox, Muslims, and all was destroyed. Catholic Church destroyed, Orthodox Church destroyed, mosque destroyed, everything destroyed. It's something that unfortunately we have seen again recently in Mosul, where you have also the same, mosque destroyed, church destroyed. Unfortunately, when there are crises and wars, the attack is against the symbol of the identity of the city. Another example, and so for us, and you see, don't forget, for us, the reconstruction of the bridge and the success of this reconstruction was about the young population, not the elders like me, but the young population was dancing in the bridge when it was reconstructed. And they were from all communities. And the bridge is speaking to the population of Mostar. Another example that I lived also for many years is Cambodia. Cambodia suffered a terrible war and the genocide. They have even a museum of genocide in Phnom Penh. And here we can see millions of visitors in front of the famous temple of Angkor Wat. It's not only one temple. Hundreds of temples are inscribed in Cambodia by UNESCO. And, you know, the impressive stones here that you see, which have been, you know, carved, the statues of the Apsara, the inscriptions on Sanskrit or in Khmer language are speaking to the visitors. They are Luoghi Parlanti. They are not only stones in front of which you are, that you are visiting. This is also a place where we are still working with my colleagues at UNESCO. We know that originally this was a Hindu temple dedicated to the god Vishnu, breaking the previous king's tradition of worshipping Shiva. It gradually turned into a Buddhist temple toward the end of the 12th century, and it's still used for worship today. Here you see, it's not only an archaeological site. It's not only a place where people are looking at this fantastic architecture, but it's also a place, and this is my pictures, it's a place of Buddhist monks going and praying up to date. Cambodia هذه. احنا عندنا العود الكمبودي. I have also an interesting approach, and I will not be too long. I received an invitation from Australia, from an Aboriginal group, because we have had a big problem about a site which was inscribed as a natural and cultural site, which is called Kakadu Park, National Park. The population of the Kakadu National Park did a lot of demonstration because Australia wanted to make a uranium mine in the Kakadu Park. So we had even demonstration inside UNESCO. I remember we were in the podium with the Director General Koichiro Matsuura, and behind there were people from Aboriginal people having, UNESCO should help us preserve this place. So what we did, we invited Aboriginals. I think it's the previous. We invited Aboriginals here. Aboriginals. We invited them to France, and we, in relation with the Minister of Culture of France of that time, Jacques Lang, we had a bus to transport them to this site, which is called Lascaux. That's one of the major prehistoric engraving and sculpture in the Lascaux site, of course inscribed on the World Heritage List. And we wanted to understand with prehistorians like the famous Yves Coppens, how the Aboriginal people from Australia can react in front of the site of paintings of the prehistoric time. What they did, they started by burning a fire at the entrance of the grotto, and then they have a very grave and respectful attitude inside the grotto. Silence. They told us afterwards, in a seminar like this one organized in UNESCO with the Aboriginal people and with experts in prehistorian, they told us that they can understand this painting and that they have a meaning for them. But the group of Aboriginal didn't want to be photographed in the site of Lascaux. They said, no, this is something which is a high value for us. Don't take picture. Because we want to listen what we are having as some kind of message they have from this painting. And they said, I quote, "Our painting are our title deed on this earth. If we lose that title, the paintings are meaningless. It's that simple. So strong is the pressure we are under from herders, mining companies, tour operators who are trying to keep us away from our land. They are trying to deny our rights." So this is another example of Luoghi Parlanti illustrating perfectly the initiative launched by President Carlota Del Bianco and the team. And, I can quote, the young Marcel Proust, the famous French author, who opens a fantastic world by discovering what his lamp with the magic lantern, he can make unexpected worlds appear on the walls. And he wrote, like the first architect and glass masters of the Gothic age, she substituted the opacity of the wall with impalpable iridescence, supernatural multicolored apparition where legends were depicted like a flickering and momentary stained glass window. So I can say, in order to conclude, that I quote this French book also about how the place affects us. What are the factor mechanisms at work? On the one hand, our mood of the moment, our representations, memories, experience, expectations enter into this construction. On the other hand, the place, by its very configuration and the meaning that we attribute to it, gives something. Those surprises, those worries, those sources, morally or physically. In this changing relationship which crystallizes in the transition from emotion to feeling, the image and the stakes of the self are never absent. Between philosophy, science, and action and human sciences, by allowing a detour through neurosciences, passing from the usher house to the bleacher of the football stadium, resulting from a symposium organized, for example, in Cerisy in 2018, we have a necessary incomplete overview of our relationship with places and try to understand how these places affect us, what they make us do, and what we do with them. I would like to add, to finish, a recent article published by Dr. Anne-Sophie Bourg from École Française de Rome, this famous school which has now more than 150 years of existence in Rome. And I quote in French, « Faire parler les statues et faire taire les statues de l'écriture à l'usage de l'explosif. L'indagine ha preso come punto di partenza una figura familiare agli abitanti del quartiere di Piazza Navona, la famosa statua parlante di Pasquino. Dalla sua scoperta nel Rinascimento fino ad oggi, questo antico marmo è diventato il luogo di affissioni, di epigrammi e altre forme di espressione scritta con le autorità religiose e politiche che dicono la pasquinade. Infatti, dal XVI secolo le parole dovrebbero essere le sue, sono esposte nel suo piedestallo, prendono la forma di epigrammi in dialetto, in latino o in italiano, attaccando il potere, denunciando ingiustizia o esprimendo malumori secondo i tempi fino alla morte. Un tipo di satira politico ha preso anche il nome di pasquinade perché si ispira a questi testi esposti ai piedi della statua che sembrano farla parlare. I wish all success to this project, which is already widely presented in a number of sites in Italy, starting by Florence, and that I have the pleasure with my colleagues and friends from Del Bianco to see what means the concept of Luoghi Parlanti. Grazie mille. Thank you for your attention.
Much, dear Honorary President Dr. Bushnaki. And now I am delighted to invite another, permit me to say, friend of us, of our foundation that follow our activity and spontaneously share with us his outstanding knowledge and experience. So I am delighted to give the floor to Mr. Francesco Mandarin, former Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Culture 2010-2018, but let me call him Francesco, because he's a very close friend of us, and we are all pleased.
Thank you very much.
He follows us in this experience of the festival. The floor is yours, dear Francesco.
Thank you, dear Simone. Thank you very much. And thanks to, first of all, I would like to thank the 3 presidents of the foundation. Paolo, I don't see him. Yep, there's Paolo. Great, Paolo. Paolo, Munir, and Carlotta. And also the other component of this organization, the other sisters of Carlotta, Caterina and Corinna. I call them the 3 C's. And of course, I'm very honored to be with you today, also to see a lot of friends that I haven't seen in a while, like Jan van der Borg, who have a long life in the past, together 30 years ago in Venice, and of course, my friend Jazir. I had the privilege of collaborating with him, in this very great effort that Saudi Arabia is doing, to protect, uncover and protect fantastic heritage of the country and to make it known around the world. Now, you say, and of course, speaking after Munir is very difficult because Munir makes it so lively that I'm always intimidated by your rhetoric. But let me say one thing also: we are in a luogo parlante, in a speaking place, because this place talks about our history. And yesterday with Corinna, we were trying to decipher what is written there. Huh? You see that there is a sign there over there. It's written Fert, F-E-R-T. And then there is a strange symbol. Now, so we discovered with Corinna what it means. Now, this is the symbol of the Savoy dynasty. It is a symbol of our monarchy, the one that ruled Italy until 1946. And this hall is called the Royal Hall for this. Yes, this. And the symbol is F-E-R-T, means many things, but mostly probably something like Fides est regni tutela. Faith is the preservation of the kingdom, in Latin. And yeah, over there, you see it's written F-E-R-T on the wall. Many, many, many times, in the mosaic. F-E-R-T, Fert. Means the faith, Fides, is est, the conservation, the preservation, the protection of the kingdom. Something you could use also in Saudi Arabia. And next to it, there is a sign. You see the sign on the next to it. This is the Savoy knot. It's one of the marine knots that is used. Savoy is the name of the royal house of Italy. This is the House of Savoy, which were originally in the Savoy region in France, but then became also the kings of Piedmont, and then in 1860 became the kings of Italy altogether. So they unified the country. Okay, so we have here a luogo parlante, speaks about the history of our country. But that's not my talk today. I have been asked to sort of look together with you, and in course a collaboration with Maria Teresa, who will run the round table later on, to discuss an issue which is, let's call it a burning issue. The issue of tourism, how to manage tourism today and in the future in order to make it a positive force in the conservation of heritage and not a negative force. This is a concern for everybody who cares about heritage and tourism as a very important component of our human experience. Let's be frank. We are all tourists. Even when we are heritage preservation people, we are also tourists. So, and one thing that I wanted to stress, something that I've been looking into recently, is that in fact these two ideas, tourism and heritage, are very parallel. Now, they were born more or less in parallel. we will have later on a talk by an expert on the history of tourism, and I think it's very important to look at it, but I will try to also to use some historical images to show you how these two things are in fact very parallel. They were born together, they developed together, and sometimes we forget about, especially we, conservation people, see tourism as a kind of a enemy, a threat, and tourists see us as a kind of an obstacle. So I think this thing, somehow erases, what has been for centuries, a real parallel development. Starting from, centuries ago, when we talk about the Grand Tour, for instance, the Grand Tour, okay, is a mythical idea. At the beginning of, which the aristocracy of Europe was trying to uncover and discover the value of antiquities. So we had a lot of, important people mostly from England, France, and the northern of Europe, coming down to Italy and Greece, to discover antiquities and make these antiquities, part of their culture. But this thing was not out of the blue. It's not at some point the aristocracy woke up and said, let's take a tour. It was because a number of very important people, like for instance this French monk, Bernard de Montfaucon, had been working for centuries in trying to project the image of antiquities, and through books like this book, which is the Antiquity Explained in figures, very important, or architects and drawers like James Stewart and Nicolas Rivette went to Greece, spent 3 years in Greece, and came back and published a very important book called The Antiquities of Athens. So, in fact, the cultural life of the 16th, 17th, 18th century was full of attempts to understand and bring back the experience and the beauty also of antiquity and classical antiquities to inspire a new society. And of course, this went together with the desire of people to visit the place. So Grand Tour is the son of an intellectual effort, to bring back antiquities. And of course, we have Goethe, which embodies the two things. He's the highest literary person of the time, and his most important famous book is the Italienische Reise, the Italian travel, and very important book which tells the story about this connection between culture and antiquity. And it's full of very important messages, and of course, the books that were published, so the people, there was high demand of consumption of this kind of images, like for instance, this is the famous Philopappus monument in Athens that was brought back, and so on. So I think that the scene was ready at the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th century for, something different, which was perhaps concerning a broader group of people. And this broader group of people could come to the forefront only after a big catastrophe, a fracture, a rupture in society, which was, of course, the French Revolution, which wiped out the aristocracy and created a space for a modern bourgeoisie. Yeah, this is for the kings, but, that's the king being decapitated in France. And the bourgeoisie to take over and become the protagonist of heritage conservation on one side and tourism on the other. For instance, we have the very famous Prosper Mérimée, a French guy who was, by the way, he's the one that wrote the Carmen, the book, the Carmen, from which the famous opera was taken. But he's also the one that for 40 years established the first inventory of heritage in France, and opening up, the minds of the society to the importance of heritage. And at the same time, we have the beginning of a movement, which perhaps the first tourist development was the creation of winter marine tourism. I put this one because it is the famous Excelsior Regina Palace in Nice, where Queen Victoria used to spend her time. By the way, as you know, Nice has now been inscribed in the World Heritage List as a memory of this important transformation, the first winter marine station in the world. Intellectuals as important as Ruskin, somehow opened up also the public to the importance of heritage preservation and so on, perhaps even creating a romantic aura around heritage, which inspired many, many people and moved the people. If you go into the literary world, this is the Hôtel des Bains in Lido di Venezia, where Thomas Mann, put his Death in Venice book, again, through a kind of romantic, decadent vision. Okay, so we have already, sorry? He wrote the book, Death in Venice, in the Bain Hotel in Venice. In Venice. You must have, there is a very important movie for this, and so on, so on, so on. Now, so the scene was ready to another transition, from the elite to the middle class. So the 1920s, 30s, or even already beginning of the end of the century, but certainly the first half of the 20th century, you have the explosion of tourism through clubs, touring clubs, which still exist, by the way, although now they're not as important as they were, became the motor, the actors of the creation of mass tourism, mostly through bicycles. It was essentially bicycle clubs and automobiles. Now, these are the two touring clubs, automobile clubs, all over the world, or at least at that time the developed world, Europe, US, etc., were gathering those who wanted to join culture and entertainment, cultural and somehow some evasion, which is the substance of tourism, interface between, leisure, entertainment, desire, and the fact that culture provides also an enrichment of your thing. So at the same time, we had the conservationists looking at other types of heritage. For instance, natural heritage. We haven't spoken much about that, but natural heritage is as important as cultural heritage. And that guy over there, who has a little spirited look, John Moore, was Scottish, by the way. He actually lived in the U.S., in the western part of the U.S., became friends with the president, Theodore Roosevelt, and created the most important club, conservationist club, the Sierra Club, which is not only a conservationist club, but also something that facilitates and promotes sustainable tourism. This is over 100 years old in the western part of the U.S. Very powerful movement, created by John Muir. This is the vision of Yosemite, as you can see, National Park. He was the one that convinced the President Theodore Roosevelt to create the first national park in Yellowstone in 1892 or something like this, very, very early. And then all the other national parks followed, and they created a very important movement, which is now a global movement for national parks. At the same time, people discovered the two major locations for tourism: the ski and the swim. Skiing in the mountains. In the 1920s and 30s, a huge development of infrastructure in mountains and so on, and of course also of marine areas. Is very interesting images of that time. Was when mountains were discovered as a destination for tourism, and of course today they are very, very important element of tourism. But also the coasts. These are images from the 1930s of beaches. Not very different in way from what we have today in the Costa Smeralda, the Costa Brava, which are maxi infrastructures for mass tourism, but certainly, and perhaps a little bit crowded sometimes, but certainly, very important, elements of our lives, our lives of the masses. So after this transition to the middle class, we get mass tourism, which is what we have today. Something that on one side is a big component of the country's economies. You will see some figures now. Very important for Italy. Italy is 13% of the GNP is tourism. So we're not talking about a major part of our economy. But at the same time, a problem for some sites. For instance, these are 4 sites, all of them in the World Heritage List, now in a moment of peak. Now, why is this happened? Well, it's happened because people want to enjoy culture, want to enjoy tourism, want to have free time. There's more resources for free time, for entertainment, and so on. And this is what happened. Look at this figure. This is only until 2018, because after we had the COVID, so which collapsed, but now we're back, and we are pre-COVID numbers. Now, this figure in mathematics is not called a linear equation. This is a logarithmic equation. So it goes up like this. No? And we have, maybe you don't see the numbers there, but in 2018 we had 1.4 billion people moving internationally. This is like a fifth of humanity. It was part of an international movement. So this shows the immensity of this, of the size of this sector. And as you can see, it doesn't look like it's declining even during economic crisis. It's tourism goes up and up and up, and I will ask Jan later on what is the current trend. It goes up and up and up, 5, 6, 7% every year. Since many years. You see, especially since the year 2000, there's been a spike of things. Now, obviously, this is parallel by other movements. So if you look at now at the heritage field, we have the World Heritage Convention, which has almost 1,200 sites. It's something that really is parallel to the explosion of tourism. We have an explosion of sites that are protected because two movements go together. That's why I insist, And then, of course, we have sites like this that are, very much demanded. Now, why is this happening? I will listen to the expert now, but what are, in fact, the effects? Now, these are the numbers. Look at that. France, 90 million people for visitors. Italy, 61. This is 1 year, yes. 2019. These are today's numbers. These numbers are, quite impressive, you see. But France is, of course, number one in international tourism, although probably in terms of money is more the US that has, the lead. But in terms of numbers of tourism. And look, when you have something like that, when you have 82 million people going to Spain, 79 million to the US, 62 to China, these are things that move the entire economy. We cannot forget it. It's something that, in a way, willy-nilly, it will affect our lives and our the life of a country. Now, why has this happened? Well, again, there is, of course, a demand. People want to have this access, want to have access to heritage, want to have access to beaches, want to have access to entertainment, and so on. But, clearly, there are some movers, some machines behind this. And in my view, I'll ask Jan if I'm right, there are three machines that support this gigantic explosion of modern tourism. The first one is the online booking system. Everybody can book anything. I went to Greenland last month, and I did my bookings, every booking in my telephone in Greenland, which is a really faraway place. So the facility, the ease to really access, systems of services that you are needed for tourism. The second one is the low-cost flights. It is really open to the world, the world to large masses of people, and even created, local economy, because very often regions attract the low-cost companies like Ryanair or EasyJet, through subsidies. This is how it happens. Italy is a champion in paying low cost. I saw the figures. Last year, Italy paid 250 million euros to low-cost companies, to fly into certain regions like Sardinia or Puglia or where that are less developed, because this actually brings the tourists. And the third is the short-term rentals or Airbnb or whatever. That is not the only one, but there, which is, as I tell my friends, who governs Italian cities? And I said, it's not the mayor. It's an app. It's an app based in Seattle called Airbnb, because they actually determine how the housing stock is used. It's not the rule, it's not the local rules, it's done by them. And of course by the partners, which are the owners and so on. And of course, we can talk for hours about this, and certainly we will have a discussion later on. But certainly these changes that I just showed make it very difficult to master this process, because the decision making is outside of the local, even national powers at sometimes. And so sometimes everywhere, but in many cases, we get over-tourism, which is, essentially a phenomenon which, tourism dominates a certain part of the city in certain areas. Of course, some cities are more exposed because they're attractive. Like you have in the US, you have New Orleans, which has this problem, like many European cities. In Europe, you have places like Barcelona, which has, by the way, also created a number of resistance and protest, and Amsterdam. And, of course, you have Venice, which is, by the way, my city. Where a number of reactions happened. Venice is not a hotel, and then you see people protesting against the big ships and so on. We can go into detail because this is more complex than I'm portraying. But in fact, there is a movement now of resistance to this. I think the fact that we got to this point is not good. The things should have been managed and accompanied. Now that in some areas this has not happened, we have conflicts, like tourists go home or something like this, which is really not nice because no, I think it's actually probably must be Barcelona or places like this. Oh, but you can find it here too, and then it's stop tourism, stop mass tourism, stop tourists, stop. I mean, this is what you get when you don't manage things, or you get conflicts. Now, parallel to over tourism, you have another process which is similar, but a bit different in terms of which is the gentrification of places. To the point that I took this picture because I found it very funny that it becomes like an official language of planning agencies. Notice of proposed gentrification, because it means that gentrification is the changing of the social structure of a city through, of course, investments that make the cost of living there unaffordable for those who are there. So gentrification is also, but gentrification and touristicization run one against each other. And to my knowledge, and for what I have read in recent papers, in fact, even gentrification is now becoming a victim of touristification because tourism makes more money more quickly than gentrification. And then, of course, resistance, conflict, actions, cities are city, these kind of things that mayors find very difficult to manage. So we have problems that are generated by the fact that there is a lack of clear policy and perhaps also of some powers that may have to be given, or at least some forum that could put together the different interests in order to make tourism compatible with heritage protection. The two things have to go together as they were born together. Now, this is now it's on the table. It's on the table of your foundation, but it's on the table of policymakers everywhere. So you heard about, you heard our friend Patrick talking about the ICOMOS. Well, ICOMOS is for heritage, but of course is aware that tourism is a force for heritage. We need tourism to finance, to get the resources to maintain heritage. So they came with a second charter. She mentioned the second charter, but in fact there was a previous one in 1999. The second one is a mise à jour update of the previous one, but essentially it's the same concept. Now you have to go balance between heritage and tourism. But there is more, I think, and perhaps even more effective, because we have an organization called the UNWTO, the World Tourist Organization, which finally entered into this field. And they came last year, 2 years ago, with this very important convention. It's not just a declaration or a charter. This is a convention that is binding to member states on tourism ethics, where essentially all the detail of what effective and balanced policy for management of tourism in a way that makes it compatible with heritage preservation is very, very much detailed. This is like a textbook on how cities and governments should proceed if they want to find a solution to the over-tourism. There is no solution, no magic solution. Tourism, as you see, go up, logarithmic. So if we don't do anything, it just continue. So this is a very, very important policy document, which I really recommend, because it's the first time that the international community, through the UNWTO, comes to the forefront with a clear policy view. By the way, they also have published this very important book called Over Tourism, which is available in the web, you can find it. It's Understanding and Managing Urban Tourism Growth. Trying also to spell out some misunderstanding, because sometimes, over tourism is accused of everything. Tourism is accused of every possible evil, which is not really responsible for everything. But this one also contains a really very precise and very interesting set of policies. Now, some cities have started implementing policies like this. For instance, I would like to, and I'm just closing, to show you a case, which I think is very important, which is the case of Amsterdam. Now, Amsterdam, very intelligent city, perhaps the most intelligent one, used the 2 years of COVID, which was like a pause in the development of tourism, to redefine its tourist policy and, in general, its urban development policy. Unfortunately, it's the only one that has done it. Venice has not done it, Barcelona has not done it. So we have a problem there because people could have used that time to really rebuild a vision for their city. But they did it, and they came out with a very interesting project, which is called the City in Balance 2022. Now there is a new version, of course, after COVID, which is a set of very precise local policies aimed at creating a livable space for citizens and somehow moderating the impact of the two processes I mentioned earlier, gentrification, touristicization, and so on, and at the same time allow tourists to come, because this is a major part of the local economy, so they don't want to destroy, they don't want to kill So Amsterdam is trying to implement the principles that UNWTO has spelled out, and we should look at that example, because if that works, then it's a very good indication that we can do something together with the local operators and the local governments, and of course with the help of central authorities, to somehow find a different future for the development of tourism and for the preservation of heritage altogether. Thank you very much. Sorry, I was stealing you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Francesco. And now we arrive and start immediately the roundtable session entitled Over Tourism Issues and Challenges. And I'm delighted to invite another friend of us, Maria Teresa Iaquinta, ICOMOS Secretary General, a member of the Scientific Committee for the Association for the Foundation of the International University of the Mediterranean Sea. And the floor is yours, dear Maria Teresa, and thank you very much.
Grazie, Simone. Buongiorno a tutti. I'm here, I'm very happy to be here, and really I thank the Foundation for this opportunity and invitation. I think that as Munir Bushnaki was saying, our friendship was born really a long time ago, around 2006, more or less, where we were working. So, but let's start immediately with our round table. More than a round table, is a sort of thematic session, and has been already beautifully introduced by Francesco Bandarin with his intervention, but also the intervention of Mr. Munir Bushnaki. As we said, as Francesco was saying before, several phenomena has intervened with tourism dynamics in this last period. Mobility, climate action, under and over tourism, and I would add also the crisis situation and disaster and conflicts. So what we are going to do today, what we want to do this morning, is just to create a sort of forum for sharing some experience. As Corinna has been already introduced, we are going to have 4 speakers: Gilles Bertrand, Tim Fairhurst, Jan van den Borg, and Aparna Tandon. Gilles is already, I think he's online, and is going to...
Yes, I am online.
Buongiorno. Buongiorno, good morning.
Buongiorno. Buongiorno, tutto bene?
Sì, tutto bene. I know that you are going to share your presentation. and Gilles Bertrand, professor of modern history at the University of Grenoble-Alpes in France, is going to give us a sort of view of what has been the evolution of the theme of tourism. And again, we are going to start again with the Grand Tour. May I ask you, can we say, Professor Bertrand, can we say that the Grand Tour represented the first form of cultural tourism? Or what is your idea?
My idea is yes, of course, I think it is. I just add that the Grand Tour is not the only practice of traveling in the early modern period, in the Middle Ages and so on. So it is a form of cultural tourism, but the word tourism, I think it's not appropriated. It announces what will be tourism, but not with the same type of temporality, with the same type of expenses. It's very different. Some aspects, and I will show them in
Excuse me, mister. Excuse me. Your presentation, we are viewing now. Your presenter is not the full screen of your presentation here. Can you switch, please?
Have today. Do you listen?
We have the preview, diapositive suivante. Cliquez pour appeler the notes, diapositive, etc., etc. We need the full screen of your presentation, Mister. Please.
Yes, I have shown it. I have begun, but I don't know. Do you see the images or not?
Maybe you have an extended desktop in your PC. You have this function in your PC.
The presentation mode.
Yes. The presentation is on, but you don't see anything.
No, we see a lot of things. This is better. This is not the maximum.
Do you see the first? Do you see the first image?
It's okay. Go ahead in this mode. Go ahead. No.
You don't see anything.
Yes, we think your slides, your preview, a lot of icons in the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
Si vous pouvez revenir avant. Alors, s'il vous plaît, vous sortez de la...
Me lo dite in italiano.
Allora, esca dalla presentazione, come la vedevamo prima, la vediamo più grande. Ritorni indietro.
Allora, io penso la prima diapositiva.
Sì, deve uscire dalla modalità presentazione. Esca dalla modalità presentazione.
Allora.
Ecco,
qui,
rimanga su
così
questa.
Va bene o no?
Rimanga su questa e va avanti lei, le fa scorrere, così noi vediamo meglio. Rimanga su questa schermata, questa tipologia di schermata, ok? Grazie mille.
Ok, va bene. Prego. So may I begin what I have to say about this problem? I don't hear anything.
It's okay. It's okay. Present in this mode, please.
Now, what I have to do now, I don't understand, really. I don't understand what I have to do for the image and for the speech.
Oh, You can go on. Okay.
I can speak.
Yes, you can speak. You can speak.
Okay. So, mobility and tourism, the long history of places of attraction. A look back at history helps, I think, as already shown by Mr. Bandarin, to shed light on the issues we face today. It's true that the advent of tourism has changed the situation by making it possible to travel for a short period of time, at much lower cost than before, and thereby increasing the number of travelers. But even before the arrival of the railways and steam power in the 19th century, the problems associated with the overconsumption of tourism were already in the making. They began to emerge in the modern era, I think, between the 16th and the 18th centuries, with the over-exploitation of certain places and the profits made by certain professions. These problems stemmed from the ritualization of itineraries and the conformity of travelers in their choice of destinations and centers of interest. In modern times, I mean 16th to 18th century, mental conditioning has already been observed in the knowledge process, while voices have been raised to denounce the risk of useless travel, of travel that teaches little and teaches poorly. The excess of crowds and the unequal preservation of spaces were not ignored. Now, to illustrate this fact, which is not so known, I'm going to draw a number of texts by travelers from before the 19th century, trying to reconstruct the stages of a journey that takes us from the idea of harmony between travelers and those who welcome them to a profound disillusionment, una delusione, followed by a call to rethink the way we travel. As we shall see, this disillusione, mitigated by proposal for remedies, was applied firstly to cities, which were practically the only objects of curiosity in Europe until the middle of the 18th century, and secondly to natural spaces far from cities, namely mountains and seasides. But far from changing the nature of the problem, this transfer from the city to the countryside, or rather the now-dual promotion of these two realities, has actually aggravated the consequences of a common overconsumption of places and made the need to react even more urgent. Stage one, there has long been an attempt to reconcile the interests of visitors with those of the host communities. The concentration of tourist flow is the fruit of really a long history. And for a long time it was the story of an harmony. Pilgrims first, as we can see in this photograph. For certain sanctuaries attracted crowds of pilgrims, generating a flourishing trade and the establishment of hotel facilities. While with the creation of university from the 12th, end of the 12th and 13th century onwards, mainly students from the north of Europe descended on the cities of the south, Bologna, Padua, Siena, but also Montpellier in France, Salamanca in Spain. The introduction of the Jubilee in Rome in 1300, at the behest of Boniface VIII, led to a huge increase in the number of hotels as studied by Mario Romani, su Pellegrini e Viaggiatori nell'economia di Roma. In Venice too, the passage of pilgrims from northern and northwestern Europe on their way to Jerusalem led to the establishment of the Ascension Fair, la Fiera dell'Ascensione, Fiera dell'Ascensa. In modern times, the fair lasted a fortnight in May or June, and was intended to make the most of a veritable windfall. Then the curious. As Mr. Bandarin already said, the Grand Tour of the 16th and 18th, 17th and 18th century also focused the curiosity of the elite on stops that were considered to be admissible. Paris, Rome, Naples, Venice, Florence, Vienna, Dresden, Amsterdam, London. This created compulsory itineraries, which have sometimes tended to be imagined as stable according to a British model, even if in reality travelers were free to organize their own journeys in a variety of ways. It was always the same cities that attracted travelers for stays of several days, weeks, and months. Telling the attraction. Throughout the modern era, the authorities pursued a deliberate policy of attracting as many people as possible. To do this, they employed the services of what we can call already advertising agents, who describe the cities and emphasize their ability to attract travelers. Francesco Sansovino's description of Venezia città nobilissima is an example of this at the end of the 16th century. In this context, the conjunction between inhabitants and visitors is often celebrated. The Venetians, the former, were all too happy to be able to welcome the whole of Europe, even though their trade in the modern period and diplomatic position had lost the splendor of the 14th and 15th century. The aim was to explain this to the second group, the visitors. In Venice, they would always be welcomed, as explained on the right side of the diapositive, a little opuscule from the end of the 17th century, La Calamita d'Europa, otherwise known of Europe, a traction of foreigners, written by a Jesuit, Napolitan, a Jesuit, Zuniga, with the intention to promote Venice's attractiveness. The Venetians, in this context, were presented as able to help foreigners to find their way around the narrow streets. And so the attraction is seen as a form of a city of paradise and Abraham, the house of Abraham, as Zuniga said. Stage 2, attracting crowds of visitors is not without risk. As you can see in this engraving of the beginning of the 18th century, St. Mark's Square packed with people. So it's not just today that towns consider that trying to attract people, but a gap may have opened up between the advertising schemes for privileged sites and the multiple and sometimes disastrous consequences endured in modern times by the increasingly massive presence of visitors. We have to record first a fierce competition between cities, political prestige, and nourished the cultural, monumental, and artistic dimension that attracted travelers. In the time of Zuniga's book, for example, this competitive game is between Versailles and Venice. Impatience with the crowd is also a motif that goes back a long way. As we can see with the comportment of Venetian people in the time of Carnival in the idea is in the 16th century to go in private feast, as you can see on the right side, to be separated from the crowd. In the 18th century, the habit is to go in the villégiature in the time of Carnival and not only at the end of summer, to escape from the mass. Of course, these crowds are also proof of Carnival's success and Venice's appeal, but there are two faces in that dimension. Overexploitation and dispersal of the artistic heritage is another consequence that was shown by a certain number of people, as Montesquieu in the first half of the 18th century, when he said about all Italy, the English took everything from Italy: painting, statues, portraits. The new Rome sold off the old one piece by piece. Or solutions already in that time were proposed, as in Montesquieu diary journal. A law would have to be passed in Rome to the effect that the main statues would be immovable and could only be sold with the houses in which they were located, on pain of confiscation of the house and other belongings of the seller. Otherwise, Rome will be completely stripped. Third stage. Now, in the second one, we have the idea of Lord Elgin with the Parthenon, etc. Third stage, new attractions and fear of the ensuing damage. At the end of the modern era, so during the Romantic period, the great political and artistic capitals were no longer the only places of attraction in Europe. Mountainous areas and seaside resorts were added. But this doesn't change the problems of the over-exploitation. And with the help of not well-known Gilbert Rome, in his journey to Switzerland with his pupil, the young Russian Pavel Stroganov, just before French Revolution, we can pick up the paradox of the attraction of these new locations for people from the cities. Example, the Pramplatz is the most in Switzerland, interesting point from which to enjoy beautiful spectacles. It is higher than the Montanvert, but less difficult access. The view is incomparably more extensive, richer, and I am surprised that it is so little frequented, and not at all by women. So,
Professor Bertrand, I have to tell you that you have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is in the attraction. It is contained the negative effect of the influx of travelers in these mountains. As a result of being visited too often by foreigners who came in these innocent customs, these inhabitants have lost their hospitable character and are now perhaps inferior to those who visit them to learn from them how to become better. And this degradation of Swiss people was repeated as deprivation, and the visitors were described as unbridled mob, une tourbe effrénée, who was going to see the Alps. So the claim was to rebuild a travel ethic. This ethic was to be constructed with the contact with people, not only to visit to these different people, claimed Gilbert Rome, but to live as much as possible among them, to work as they do, to follow them to the fairs and on their pilgrimage, to experience all the seasons in the same place, to consult the old men, to study people among its neighbors, and so on. In this, we can see the reference to arts of travels as Diderot, who said in 1774, get out of the capitals and do the same in other cities. Roam to the countryside. You will enter the peasant's cottage if you don't disdain agriculture and the rustic economy. In this way of claiming new way of visit this, and then with a link with the on this last slide, a very recent extraction from Marco Albino Ferrari in a book called Assalto alle Alpi, where he says the Alps are threatened by past development models on a material level from the launch of new heavy tourist infrastructures, on an immaterial level through old idealizing stereotypes which reduce the mountains to a place of pure beauty. Now, it is like the link between this very precise mountains and the text of Gilbert Rome at the end of the 18th century. And so it is necessary to collegate to text about mountains, because this is my last sentence. They ask the same question which remains ours: how to reconcile the thirst for knowledge and respect for the harmony of places, how to organize our curiosity without trying to see everything, how to be satisfied with more modest shows, becoming less predatory without yet lock ourselves into constraints that could take away our taste for living and for loving. We can only hope that it will be possible to achieve this without having to go through the stage of irreversible catastrophes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bertrand, for this really complex journey in time and how the traveling has been becoming more and more important and part of our life. Now I would like really to call Tim Farhurst, Jan van den Borg, and Aparna Tandon to come here so that we continue our journey into the theme of this first panel on all the new challenges of tourism. And I would like to give the word to Tim. Who will talk to us about climate action and tourism. Please.
Good morning. Do you have the clicker? Do I have my presentation, please? It's very good to be back. Thank you for the invitation. Do you prefer me to stand? Would that be better for people who are over there? Is that easier? Okay, this is now taxi. I need 3 hands. I need one for the microphone, one for my phone, one for the clicker. All right, this is going to look odd, but we'll just try and keep it quick. So I'm here to talk about climate action and tourism, so in a way bringing it down from a more academic approach to what's happening at a European level. No, I can't read it from there, it's fine, don't worry. So just to introduce myself and the organization a little bit. European Tourism Association, we're not academic, we're a trade association. We have about 1,100 members. They could be anywhere in the world if they sell Europe, in California or Beijing, but mostly they're in Europe and they're either the supply chain or destination management organizations. So we have about 120 from national to local level. So we're quite a strong public-private dialogue organization as well as a trade association promoting the usual things that trade associations do, like lots of commercial activity. So from a climate perspective, we've tried to get involved. We declared a climate emergency in 2020, and we were found a signatory and helped get the Glasgow Declaration for Climate Action in Tourism on the way. That's a very bright light, but okay. We spend a lot of time putting together events. Tomorrow, actually, I'll be sitting in a very nice hotel you've put me in, a B&B hotel, which is also one of our members. I'll be sitting there running an event on sourcing sustainable tourism. And we've got a couple of very interesting case studies at the beginning of that, of how destinations and businesses are creating new tools to help make decisions that are based on sustainability metrics. So, focusing on climate, and there's lots of other things that have come up about sustainability, happy to chat about those in the break or lunch or whatever, but just some numbers. COP21 was 2015. That's when the world agreed that 1.5 degrees was a good idea, 2 degrees really absolutely the limit. So we're halfway there. We're only 15% of the way to the reduction. So if we were at school, we'd be in trouble. I get to see myself now. That's great. Okay. So EU's goal for reduction is 55% by 2030. And the thing to remember is that all the easy stuff has been done, a lot of it. So restructuring electricity generation, decarbonizing that was easier. Getting us to change is much harder. We'll be getting onto that more in a second. So what's interesting also is that during the pandemic, it was really clear that with the loss of tourism, pretty much, so you saw a little bit of domestic tourism, but something like 85% of Europe's international tourism is Europeans visiting other Europeans. That stopped, and we obviously didn't have any of the long-haul tourism as well. So the EU prioritized tourism as an industry that needed a plan to get to a better place by 2030 with a green transition, a digital transition, and to be more resilient. Climate, obviously fundamental. But what's been happening since, and we heard people touching on it so far, is volume is back. A lot of people didn't spend the money they could have spent, they stayed at home, but they've come back. US numbers to Italy are higher than they were in 2019. There hasn't been much Chinese business to Europe in the last 3 years. There will be a huge amount next year. So there's a lot of economic recovery. Meanwhile, the climate emergency is affecting the actual appeal of destinations. So you're already seeing academic work saying what is going to be the impact of increasing temperatures in southern Europe on holiday behavior in the summer. That's happening. It's not in the future. So, big issues. Decarbonization. We agree what we need to do. There isn't agreement on how, nor the mechanisms. Okay, so there's no such thing as a carbon budget per country in the EU yet. The initial reductions, as I said, were structural. The hard stuff is discretionary. It's the choices we make. And it's very clear that consumer preference will not move fast enough. So it's one of those occasions where the private sector can't use the lazy excuse to say, well, we're very demand-driven. You can't wait for demand to change on this. Industry needs to move ahead. And so does the regulatory framework. Very, very clear data on this. And I know lots of people say, oh, sure, I'd like to make sustainable choices when they're asked. In practice, they don't. The vast majority. Very clear data on that. So, regulation, I'll get onto it. Lots of structural support needed. Investors need to know, shall I invest in a factory making sustainable aviation fuel? Is that a good use of my capital fund? They need to know what the regulatory environment is to get the private sector funding moving. Decision-making support, some of that's at a local level. How do I discriminate between different types of tourism I could encourage? And aviation is hard. It's really difficult to decarbonize aviation. It's easier to decarbonize other things, and it's important we don't get into an intermodal battle, aviation bad, trains good. It's too simplistic. You're not going to get rid of aviation. You need to figure out how to manage it. On that, very good report. I recommend you have a look at it, Envisioning Tourism 2030 and Beyond, produced by a charity called the Travel Foundation, and it's intended to be a sort of policy provocation. There's no prescription in it. They're not telling us how to do this. But the very important takeaway from it is that the only scenario they could see that we could hit 2050 goals is to reduce the rate of growth in aviation. So not reduce aviation, the rate of growth, because if it went back to the 2019 growth rates, aviation would be 75% of our carbon budget by 2050, just aviation. That is clearly not possible. We've got food, we've got construction, we've got all the other sectors too. Okay, we're back. Lots of other things in there. There's a very good summary online, so I won't repeat it now. But I think from a tourism policy perspective, this is having an impact on what the public sector is doing. Are you targeting more short-haul customers? Lots of European countries are de-investing in offices outside of Europe because it's politically not acceptable to be seen to be promoting something that induces a lot of aviation. We'd probably say that was a bit too simplistic, but the interesting thing is, how are you going to control aviation? It's not obvious that price is a very good control. Flights are much more expensive, volumes have gone up. So probably what's going to happen is slot management, allowing less flights in. It's already happening in some places. What's going on a policy front? Again, I was asked to talk about the EU side, so you get a little bit of current EU legislative review. So refuel EU aviation regulation. SAF means sustainable aviation fuel. The problem is there isn't enough. So the European aviation industry buys up all the sustainable aviation fuel there isn't enough. So that's an example of, it's great to have a policy goal, but you need to be able to fulfill it. Energy taxation directive, for the first time, that's going to bring aviation fuel into scope. So there'll be a tax on aviation fuel, which has never existed before. Will it make much of a difference? We'll see. Multimodal digital mobility services. That is, can I buy one ticket that is the train plus the plane plus the bus? One QR code that is recognized across all modes. If we can do that, it's very likely we will be able to use more lower carbon forms of transport more easily. Tourism transition pathway, that's what I referred to at the beginning. That's the European Union saying we need a plan, 27 different objectives in it. Again, read all about it online. The thing that's perhaps interesting and controversial to share today is a Green Claims Directive, which is focusing on how you as consumers, if you happen to be European, are spoken to by companies who are claiming to be virtuous in the area of environmental sustainability. Those numbers come from the European Commission. So they did some research on what's available online, and they found that essentially there are a lot of fairly spurious, unsubstantiated claims, and it's way too complicated. Look, there's 230 ways of getting accreditation or certification on green stuff in Europe. That's ridiculous. How do you as a consumer discriminate between that label and another label? Are they all the same? Very definitely not. So consumer law is considered insufficient to help people discriminate. Very quickly, and I know we're short of time, so I won't read out the words, but green claims are claims by a business to a consumer of certain environmental performance, and you absolutely have to prove them. What they're going to, I think this will be shared, so if you want to have a look, do. If you're a business, this is what you need to think. You've got to get everything checked out before you make a claim on your website. You've got to make sure it's science-backed. If there's applicable standards, you must meet them. This is very rigorous. You've got to talk about life cycle. So that's more about products than services. And you can't just say, hey, we offset everything. Offsetting itself, becoming increasingly problematic. What are you doing about reduction and removal? You've got to say, are we doing it as an extra, as something that's beyond a requirement, or are you doing it because this is just what you are required to do by law? So you shouldn't get too many points for just obeying the law, right? So you need to distinguish what you're doing above the legal requirement. It won't affect businesses that employ less than 10 people or turn over less than 2 million euros a year. Both of those things need to be true to be exempt. But look at the fine. I mean, this is in the area of EU competition law as well. 4% of global turnover if you get this wrong. Now, that would be for a very serious and persistent infringement, and that would be the sorts of organizations they'd have in mind would be airlines, probably. But that's a very, very big number. Lots of problems with it. I won't get into too much detail, but the biggest problem is if you require advance proof, we think it's going to stop people trying because it's quite intimidating. There aren't enough auditors in Europe to check to see if the claims are accurate. So are we just going to have to empty the internet of claims until we've got that? But it's very interesting to see how we are seeing the regulatory environment and the compliance authorities starting to act quite aggressively. So, for example, in the UK, it's been found you cannot sell a tour that requires flying as planet-friendly, even if, once you get to the place, there's lots of very good practice going on the ground. So that's the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK saying, no, can't call that planet-friendly. You can probably call it destination-friendly. So it's interesting to see the regulatory environment changing. Can you have a flight comparison site saying, well, this is a greener option? Well, yes, but it's all relative. Are you also suggesting that they could do a non-flight option as well? So you've got to be honest about what options you're talking about. Nearly there. So what do I think is happening out there, and what are the implications in practice to what you can buy, what's being offered? You can see on websites already, flight-free options are appearing, and there is quite a lively discussion about what is the true cost of flights. And also there's a related discussion of should it be legal to sell cheap flights. So the Amsterdam to Malaga for €4.99, just as a loss leader, should that be legal? ? And you can be sure that's going to get legally complicated because the aviation industry will say, fair enough, but you are going to do that for the food industry too, right? So you can see the trouble ahead. Process of changing product, worth thinking about that a bit. So if it's the case, I'm an American operator, and I think, goodness, there's going to be fewer slots into European airports, so that is going to put the price up. What's my approach? Do I encourage people to travel less but stay longer? What's the impact going to be on product if capacity is constrained on aviation? Something we've only begun to start thinking about. I think destigmatizing coach travel, I'm biased, a lot of our members do group tourism. I think it's great. I started my career in tourism taking American students around Italy. Sorry, I'm part of the problem. But it's very low emission. It's more low emission than most public transport in cities. It makes great use of road space, but it's seen as a symbol of over-tourism, so there's lots of anti-coach regulation. Not smart. Decision support tools, I think I'll mention a little bit about that at the end slide, but what's very interesting is there's lots of preconceptions about, well, surely domestic tourism's better, for example. Interestingly, if you do the research, and if you include in sustainability community perception, so for example in southern Spain, domestic Spanish tourists are not as popular as international tourists. It's to do with spend, it's to do with behavior, it's complicated. So depending what variables you include, you're going to get a different answer as to where you should spend your promotional money. So last slide. I was trying to rush through it because I know we're tight for time. So if I were talking to a room of policymakers, the top one's most important. So I mentioned 230 different accreditation systems earlier. So the problem we've got is there isn't yet an EU standard on measuring carbon, which is absurd. So if we can all agree, and it's certainly true with the accommodation industry, who spends a lot of time receiving questions from operators saying, please tell me your
third-party audited carbon footprint? What can you tell me about your environmental initiatives? Questions, questions, questions. Every operator asks different sorts of questions. If you're the hotelier, that's complicated. It would be great to agree 4, 5, 6 core metrics which, irrespective of what certification system you use, those 4, 5, 6 metrics are the same and the methodology is the same. If we don't get that, we're not going to do this. And related to that is you need to make it easier. If I'm an operator, I'm trying to buy a product, and I need to make sure it meets standards, how do I get reassured that they in fact do meet standards? What, is blockchain part of the answer to that? Destinations, they're already investing in tools, dashboards, which help them understand what's working, what isn't. So a very good example is the one that we'll talk about tomorrow, and it's to do with whether destinations include full spectrum sustainability or just focus on climate or social or economic. And depending on which filters you use, you get a very different answer as to where you should be spending your promotional money. For industry, again, product development is where a lot of people are spending much of their time. But the key thing, and it certainly picks up on some of the over-tourism stuff we heard earlier, we have to help people sell other things. It's all very well from a destination's perspective saying, but other things are lovely, don't just go to the famous ones. You've got to give people the commercial confidence to sell other things, otherwise you won't get the change you want to see. So, in summary, make it easier to do the right thing, and again, if you're only going to take one link out of this, have a look at firstmileproject.eu. Super interesting. It benefits from lots of behavioral psychology. If we're smart, we can ensure that people, without thinking about it, are making much more sustainable choices. There's a lot of good material on that website, so I won't waste more time this morning by repeating it. But this is about doing things to encourage positive change rather than wagging our finger saying you're a bad person for wanting to do X, Y, or Z. So behavioral psychology is going to be a big part of the answer. That's my closing thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. You frightened us quite a lot, but it's okay. In any case, now I'm passing to topic 3, between under and over tourism, and how to make tourism development sustainable, and how we can wisely use tourist public spaces and public visitor facilities.
Thank you very much also for having me here today with some of my students who will be joining us this afternoon. I think it's indeed a very challenging task to through these kind of meetings, and I'm really grateful to the foundation that they foster these kind of initiatives where people get to meet each other, more understanding, tolerance and so forth. Some wars have already been mentioned in Europe, in the Middle East. I wanted to take one of my Ethiopian students to this meeting. He's a PhD student working in Bahir Dar, close to the lake. The Blue Nile is born there, is running through that region. But the Nobel Prize winner premier targets universities, families, kids, and so forth. And the world is actually sort of not really looking at these kind of cases, but only to the top hotspots of intolerance. Anyway, having said that, thank you again for having me here. I'm an economist, and that's a strange kind of job, but where Francesco sees Savoyan notes and knots and thirds, I see a cruise ship coming out of the I don't know, in the middle of this mosaic. Yeah, I don't know what, but anyway. So I have a different look at stuff than I have no idea. But I see a cruise ship coming into the port of Venice. Is it a crown? Oh, fantastic! Oh, that's my sort of my bias. Anyway, what I'm going to do today is to talk about what I think are the causes, from an economical perspective, of under-tourism and over-tourism. And what I'm not going to do is to talk about the usual suspects, the usual sort of organizations or parts of society that are usually taking the blame for over and under tourism. We have the cruise ship, the big ships, we have the low-cost airlines, Airbnb, uncivilized visitors are terrorists, this kind of narratives. I'm just going to look at the problem of under and over tourism, unsustainable tourism, from an economical, environmental point of view. Now, I think that the drive to either under and over tourism is very much linked and embedded in the character of the tourism product. Tourism products are, per definition, or by fact, unique and non-reproducible. If you lose, we had a discussion with Simone this morning about the dance in Africa. If people are relocating this tradition, it's just dying out and cannot be reproduced. Talking about Venice being banalized. Take Leuven, where I'm teaching. In the 70s and 80s, the city wanted to tear down the béguinage. The university said, well, you cannot do that, we buy it, so we use it for our Leuven, very close to it. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Yeah, Louvain, yeah. And the city said, we want to get rid of that béguinage, we want to make it a new housing complex. The university bought it and we conserved it, and it is a World Heritage Site now. Now, I think that part of the uniqueness and the non-reproducible, it is also a public good, a cultural common. It is in many places, mountains, lakes, city centers, béguinage, it is of everybody, and it is not a place or a good that is actually dealing and that is actually managed by the rules of the market. There is no market price, there's no signal neither to the potential users as producers of the sites nor to the people that visit the places of the value of the sites. There's no explicit, we understand the value as visitors, but we not always understand the value from a sort of a public policy perspective. In other words, if you go to Venice for a few hours and you jump off a cruise ship, you do not understand what actually the price of that visit could have been if you were paying the full costs of that visit. It's what we said before also about the flying. We don't pay as flyers, as people that are flying around the full cost. So what I'm now arguing is that over, but also under tourism are a part of this phenomena that has been called the tragedy of the common goods, the tragedy of the commons. Whereas if you have a very quickly giving the example, the concrete example that was used by Harding in the Science magazine, he said that if you have a green space, a field where every individual user tries to get as much cows going around and feeding themselves, in a sort of a few years you will lose that field and also the possibility for older people to grow cows and to get more money, food and so forth. In other words, I think that to a very large extent the problem of over and under tourism, of unsustainable tourism, is a declination of the classical problem of the tragedy of the commons. Something becoming so successful, something without the use, the rules for the use or property rules that can protect people from free riding, can be both industry but also the visitors but also the locals, free riding the potential value of these natural, cultural assets, capital. Now, of course, public space and public infrastructure is part of this problem. Not many people in Amsterdam see the transportation, for example, as a tourism product. They are just free riding on that availability, and the local people often pick up the bill. Now, if that is indeed the truth, I don't think that we should continue to bash Airbnb or to bash low-cost airlines, but we should be sort of acknowledging that they are part of this more common problem of the strategy of the commons. And this means that you can find some kind of a strategy that actually sort of might help you to understand the problem better, but also come up with the right policy measures. And that needs some courage, but I get back to that. This strategy has a number of dimensions, of features, and I'm just going to run through them. And we are discussing them, for example, also in the T4T strategy. I'm an academic member of that panel that actually sort of works on the strategy. And the first rule within such a strategy is that you have always to favor and to prefer quality over quantity. And when I'm talking about quality, many people are accusing me of being arrogant and elitist because they see quality as something that of people spending a lot of money, people doing fancy things and buying Gucci bags and so forth. But quality tourism is actually what you can experience just looking at all the posters. That is quality tourism. It's not the big money, but it's about understanding a place. It's about leaving a footprint, a massive integrated footprint that is actually acceptable for the local society. Now that brings me to the second very important point. Tourism development should always be in favor of sustaining the local society, local entrepreneurs, and of course the people who live in a place, the people who are sort of the owners, even if it's not always the case, of the capital in the place. If tourism development is against their interest of local, then you should stop that kind of development. The fact that you, first of all, target the local population, the local firms, doesn't mean that you shouldn't make companies that are not local earn money too. I mean, that can be completely compatible with. But your first policy objective should be take care of the locals, take care of the local companies, the local entrepreneurs. Thirdly, which is also very important, Francesco showed some figures, and indeed we have a lot of signals now that 2023 will be a top year, and much better than 2019, notwithstanding some markets still not traveling as much. But the third thing is that we should also start to measure all the effects of tourism for local communities and local economies. The times that we can just discuss stuff in terms of arrivals and overnight stays and dollars earned is over. We should be looking at carbon footprints. We should be looking, also as scientists, at social effects, at intolerances. We should be looking actually at what we have been working on very much in Venice, the carrying capacity of destinations. There is no destination that just can take on an infinite number of visitors. There is some kind of maximum threshold. And if you go over that threshold, you are jeopardizing at least one of the dimensions, social, economic, or environmental dimensions of destination. Now, without that knowledge, which is a claim to come to construct observatories or dashboards that are much more omnicomprehensive than the UNWTO, who does very good work, I'm not saying that, but their dashboards on arrivals, overnight stays, and the dollars spent by visitors in places. Now, just getting back to what Francesco said before on Amsterdam. Amsterdam is, for me, indeed one of the few places that actually has taken the opportunity of the pandemic to rework the strategy. The city imbalance thing is already, let's say, has stopped. And Amsterdam has now decided, and I'm coming back to what I said before, to a more courageous, a much more radical, disruptive kind of tourism policy. They're saying it's not only a question of finding a balance between tourism and the rest of the place. But it's also about taking really tough decisions. And the decisions they were taking are taking. I've had a very long chat last year, just before this was discussed in the city council, are, for example, to get rid of the red light district in the middle of the center and reposition Amsterdam as a capital of culture and not of coffee shops and red light districts. They are now moving the cruise terminal from the center to the peripheral areas, closer to the port area. They're taking really bold decisions that nobody ever thought Amsterdam could have been taken, but they're taking them. They're rediscussing the slots on Schiphol Airport. Schiphol was an airport that was extremely congested also during the pandemic years. They had not enough capacity to, also because of some organizational problems, but they're now discussing the possibility to give the slots of the low-cost airlines in the F pier to KLM, for example, who is obviously catering for a different kind of people visiting Venice than the low-cost airlines. In other words, and that is, I think, what the right direction would be in order to solve some of the problems you were also mentioning. You should be thinking a bit out of the box. You should be asking the people, is a 2-day holiday, long weekend in Malaga, is that contributing to the quality of your life? Does it make sense to go just for 10 hours to Malaga? So it's not a question of taking the car or the bike or the plane, but it's just saying, what is tourism about? What are the core values of your going around? And then I think very slowly you can sort of try to see whether you can get a new kind of travel, new kind of tourism that doesn't need to be expensive, that is actually making our lives worthwhile, and is a form of tourism that is actually fully compatible with the mission, the vision of this foundation that organizes the conference, and of course of many of the people that I've been talking about. One of the biggest disappointments I had this year was UNESCO not putting Venice on the list of endangered heritage. It's really, that is a tragedy, how such an organization with such a strong reputation as being bipartisan find some kind of really backroom compromise, and for the nth time, let's say, sort of gives the mayor the green light to continue to do nothing about over-tourism. That is for me. So I think courage is something that we all need to get this very important sector, socially, economically, and so forth, of cultural tourism on the right tracks, and to make sure that it is something positive, not only for the companies that work in tourism, not only for the destinations, but also for the people that live there, in order to indeed make tourism also a source of conservation of material and immaterial heritage. I'm stopping here, already over time, I see that.
Thank you.
But there are some questions, I think.
Yes. Was perfect, and there was fun. Thank you. Let's move to. Sorry because sometimes I'm forgetting to have also a microphone, and I would like also to take the opportunity to greet all the people that are following us from remote. For that, I'm sorry for that. But now we go to probably the last, but certainly the most urgent topic: culture in the pursuit of disaster resilience, climate action, and sustainable development. In this, I'm calling my colleague Aparna Tandon from ICRAM, who has an very extensive experience in this field. So I'm passing you the word. And how do you propose effective initiatives to support them, to support the communities? But let's see.
mull over this question and come back to you about that. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. So, first of all, I would like to thank the Del Bianco Foundation for inviting ICROM colleagues and ICROM staff here, and also you heard from our Director General. We're very grateful to be here in this festival. And with sharing this panel with such an illustrious, panelists, and coming in at the last. So I would like to first and foremost, a disclaimer. I'm a conservator. I'm not an economist. I'm not, a person in the tourism industry. And I'm not here to bash the tourism industry. But I am just going to highlight a few aspects about climate change, its impacts on communities, and what we can do, as Francesco Bandarin said, to make tourism a force for safeguarding heritage and people. So first of all, let's think about climate change and how it is causing existing hazard events like floods, like intense rainfall, storms, fires. We saw devastating fires in Hawaii. These are disruptions in tourism industry too, and disruptions for the locals who feel it. And they are devastating lives, livelihoods, and cultures. These risks combine with other threats such as conflicts, epidemics, or inflation, creating what we call as compound crises, or a phenomena increasingly referred as the polycrisis. So we are living in the age of polycrisis. But I want to highlight this aspect. Often, sitting in gatherings like this, we tend to limit climate change as a problem of carbon in the air. It is not decarbonization. We have to look at the root causes of climate change. Only then we will be able to address the problem. And as Tim said, perhaps changing ourselves is the most difficult part of it all, right? Changing the culture which brought us to this. And this image should tell you, and it's from my part of the world where I come from, we have really created a problem by our own action through industrialization, infrastructure development, and years of exploitation that has degraded our land and polluted as well as depleted our freshwater resources. In fact, the UN Water has produced systematic scientific documentation on how climate crisis is a water crisis. And while tourism industry, like other industries, is a force for revitalization, is rejuvenating economies, yet it is putting pressure on natural resources, which is increasing consumption in areas where resources are already scarce. An average golf course in a tropical country such as Thailand, again my part of the world, needs 1,500 kgs of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides per year, but it also uses as much water as 60,000 rural dwellers or villagers would use. This is huge. This is huge, and we cannot say that we can justify this kind of a, consumption at any stage, especially now when we are at the brink of an extinction. A pertinent example of this kind of consumption is Ubatuba in Brazil, a popular tourist destination. It's a mountainous region located off the coast of Sao Paulo. It is known for its freshwater lakes and biodiversity. Ubatuba is prone to landslides and flash floods due to intense rainfall and also flooding of water bodies. Warming seas are increasing this phenomenon. These incidents are becoming more intense due to climate change. Erosion of the coastline and sea level rise are some of the other effects of the climate change. That is not all. Locals have left farming to serve the growing tourism industry. Environmental protection laws have made traditional farming impossible and land owning also very difficult. So these were slaves, Quilombola, who were settled here. They were used to farming, but now they are heavily engaged in tourism industry. Lack of sewage system, a proper sewage system, and over-tourism have polluted all the freshwater reserves, bringing waterborne diseases to the local community. When floods occur, the communities are cut off from Sao Paulo and often rely on food reserves that are insufficient. As part of ICROM's Net Zero Heritage for Climate Action project, which is the project that my program is developing, we are working in these kinds of climate hotspots in Brazil, in Rosetta, Egypt, in India, and in Uganda, as well as in Sudan, where we are trying to understand how indigenous knowledge, community health knowledge, can be used to develop integrated strategies for heritage safeguard, for disaster risk reduction, and climate action. And Ubatuba, as I said, is one of the sites where in this project, the Quilombola community and some researchers have got together to understand how to address food security through indigenous knowledge and promote a better quality of life for food sovereignty, reduction of risk of material losses and deaths, and guarantee a land tenure and access to traditional medicine. As the key activities of the program, the project include collection and mapping of traditional medicine species and prototype of green pharmacy, mapping food and local knowledge for, and also looking at food preservation techniques, because when floods occur, tourists stop coming and the communities are isolated. They have no ways of connecting to Sao Paulo. There is one road that serves. And recording of traditional knowledge for substantial, sustainable use of natural resources and coping with climate extremes. A similar project is going on in Rosetta, Egypt, which is tapping into the local knowledge, and again, similar problems of, erosion. And this used to be Rosetta, this village in Rosetta is part of this biodiverse delta where Nile empties into the Mediterranean Sea, and it is used to be known as the food bowl of Egypt. Again, also very much known for its built heritage, known for its crafts. But first problem came when there was building of high dam, which stopped the flooding of the Nile Delta, and as a result, this delta and the soil has become infertile. There is massive erosion and land erosion, and water from the sea is coming inside the delta and making further, the sand is coming inside, so there is desertification that is happening. And the government's answer of tourism development, infrastructure development, as well as building of seawalls has yielded limited results. What we are trying to do with Net Zero is we are trying to connect climate science with the lived experiences and traditional practices of the indigenous people in this area to try to understand how this delta can become fertile again, can become self-sustainable again. But the window of time available for us is very short because most of the knowledge holders, according to our research, are in their 70s and 80s, and they're likely to pass away very soon. So this is the problem. And now some key considerations for all of us. We need new mental models for heritage that recognize the interdependencies between physical heritage, cultural heritage, and the environmental heritage. We also need to understand that climate change was caused by a culture of consumption, and we need to overturn that culture of consumption. So we need also to understand that. We need to develop new adaptive pathways to contribute to just climate action and support the documentation of traditional knowledge. And here is a plea to the tourism industry: invest in research. That's a very good way to go green, and that is not without evidence. We have systematic evidence that there is traditional knowledge that can be that can make places sustainable. Oh, sorry. And last but not the least, because I know I'm running out of time, tourism industry and local governments need to invest more into maintaining eco-services, just like what you said. And if I may very quickly turn to the last point, we need to advocate for the incorporation of community-led approaches for tourism development, also what you said. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and let's open the floor for questions. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like really we have been going through a very complex travel journey through history, with the complexity from the pilgrims to the evolution of the concept of tourism. Then we had the need for investment. We had sort of the economic path on a need of investment. So I would really record this for our final consideration. The tragedy of common goods and the needs for new policies and policies that are good for communities. And then certainly this is very much in line with what in the last intervention of Aparna, we need to define new mental models and adaptive pathways and investment from the tourism industry. So having said that, I think that I would like really, first of all, to ask Nora if she has any. There are no, probably is too much, but if there is any kind of question from the floor or any comment from the floor.
So thank you very much. I think it was a very enlightening session, and I really appreciated all the different aspects and the fact that they were kind of complementing one to each other. And I, of course, for my personal background, I share more the experience that Aparna is kind of my path, my way of thinking. But I was very curious, and I wanted to ask to Tim if in the policies that you were looking through were some ones that were pointing out the cultural aspects, so the need of changing the behaviors, of changing the cultures. As you were mentioning, I think in the beginning of your presentation, you were saying that COVID gave a strong sensitivity, but then in the fact, no one really acts, really changed so much their attitudes. So I was wondering if there are some policies at the European level that are kind of pushing a shift in terms of culture and different behaviors, so from the other side. Thank you.
Well, that's a tough one. Okay, I'm going to give is it a controversial answer? I don't think top-down policy at a European level works on that front. Partly because, I mean, just look at where the competence sits. So, City of Venice doesn't have a good relationship with the region of Venice when it comes to, so Veneto and Venice don't really talk much when it comes to tourism policy. But the competence sits at a regional level, not even really in Rome. So even though, I think you almost need to do a governance mapping analysis to see who gets to pull which levers. Is it the mayor? Is it someone at the regional level? Is it someone in the ministry? It's very rarely someone in Brussels. So the Brussels architecture does include things like, there is an EU-wide 55% reduction by 2030, but we do not yet have a pathway to attribute the reductions per member state. That doesn't exist. So how we're going to get that negotiation, because if you're Greece, you can say, okay, fantastic Netherlands, you can all be virtuous and you've got high-speed rail. We don't. How are we going to keep our very important bit of the service economy going if aviation becomes super expensive for us? So how are those sorts of negotiations going to happen? So I think we've got some seriously difficult negotiation design to do. So that's on the climate side. I think on what you were getting at in terms of behavioral change, I think the behavioral psychology stuff I mentioned, there's a Milena, who gives the video on the website I showed you, she's got some fantastic work on, thinking about system 1, system 2 thinking, so the stuff we do without thinking and the stuff we do on reflection, and how to adapt your marketing techniques to exploit those for more sustainable choices. So the classic example is, if you give someone 3 choices, small, medium, big, 70% of people pick medium. It's not about the absolute number, it's the relative, it's the medium. So if you present 3 options, they tend to pick the middle one. If hotels, instead of saying, if you'd like to reuse your towel, please hang it up, you could actually just change the default and say, we do not launder towels every day, we replace them every 3 days. If you'd like them replaced, no problem, tell us. But just changing the default to we don't do it, ask and it's fine. That will transform the amount of laundry you have to do. So I think using it's sort of how you create the decisions, and we are humans and we need to work with human nature. There's lots of data which says that for holidays, people deprioritize sustainability because this is my annual treat. So I think we've got to work with that and be cunning in how we're designing the choices, and I think that's how progress will happen. So it's private sector through hotels and hotel chains, it's destinations in terms of making public transport easier for people who don't speak the local language, those sorts of things. So I think it's very granular. I think the EU is quite good at identifying good practice and sharing it, but there isn't really a top-down regulatory route for that.
Just a few, because my speech was rather pessimistic. Though, in reality, I'm quite optimistic. I am a boomer, and we really messed up a lot of our world, actually. But if I look at my students are much more aware, they're 20 years, much more aware of their footprints, and they're making different choices. And indeed, I said that. I'm agreeing that it's difficult to make these different choices, but young people are doing that, actually. They're taking the train, they're taking the bike, they stay home, they change stuff. And I think there's another important novelty, or relatively novelty, that can help us, and that is sort of the fact that people are really increasingly looking for unique, authentic experiences. So a lot of the, let's say, the tourist traps actually are becoming less competitive, because a lot of visitors actually really look for these experiences. So I think there is a big opportunity to use these triggers that I actually see in modern or postmodern tourism, that are actually helping us maybe to sustain this change in our travel behavior that might become more virtuous rather than vicious. So the second thing I'm optimistic about is that also the awareness that tourism is also damaging the stuff is increasing. Yes, Amsterdam is one of the few cities that actually takes very concrete and very important actions, but in an increasing number of cities or places or parks, there's an increasing awareness that we cannot go on like this. The 2 billion people that will be traveling around, looking at Francisco, the 2 billion people that are going to be running around in 2030 will bring a lot of problems to a lot of places, to an increasing number of places. So there is an increasing awareness also among policymakers and politicians that there needs to be done something. So I'm pessimistic and optimistic in the same time.
If I may, now I'm just completing to Aparna, because now we have been talking about policies, we have been talking about the idea to have good strategies, the optimism towards the young people. But I would say that last word on how we can help communities not to be completely a stranger in their own houses, in their own territories.
Thank you for asking that question. I think I tried to highlight that what we are missing out in this equation is the tourism development is done with the externals in mind. And I think increasingly what is coming out very clearly is that if the locals are engaged in the tourism industry, and their sustainability and their well-being is kept in the center, and their knowledge is used to develop, tours, itineraries, like this idea of green pharmacy in Brazil. Or also we got to know through our work in Brazil that only Brazilian local Quilombola community knows which are the evacuation routes in the mountainous region. Not even the local disaster management authority knows what are the mountainous routes. And so when the tourists are coming there and they are caught in a flash flood, it's the locals and their knowledge that can be very useful. But what is lacking is the sense of agency. So there is not agency given enough. Because this is the problem that we have also seen in India, where sometimes the locals are not engaged as tour guides, but graduates from farther away who speak English are given the opportunity or employment. So many a times the employment or the dollars are not coming to the place that is generating the tourism. It's bypassing them. So there is a part of governance in here, and there is also this idea of using the local knowledge to develop tourism industry rather the other way around. As I said before, why does Thailand need a golf course? There are many other things in Thailand to see. And there's also this Western model, no matter what you say, is being exposed. We had this discussion, we had a conference, Climate Culture Peace, where we brought practitioners, indigenous leaders from different countries, 113 countries, and overwhelmingly, everyone said that there is this aspiration to lead a Western life, or to live the bigger, the better kind of a life, the American dream. So that why would you say to somebody in Africa that, okay, you can't go and buy that SUV? So it's also about how the West has created this model of tourism, of consumption, which is then hard to get rid of, because it's hard to get rid of here. So imagine in those countries where governance is poor, how do you get it? Yes. Yeah. So.
Certainly we need to change there is a change of mindset that we need. I think we have arrived to a close. And Gilles, I forgot it. Oh, eccolo. Gilles, we see you. Would you like to give a sort of final statement?
Yes, I can observe that the discussion about present has a character of emergency, and the help that historian can give is very few. It's not a big help, because the conditions of today, expansion of travel and tourism as limits that were not conceived. That was impossible to conceive in the only to a modest modest consciousness of the few elements that we can find in the attitude of people. And my last word will be to be attentive to that union, very strong solidarity between the territories, the space, waters, the sea, and so on, and inhabitants and people who are sometimes forgotten by tourists, and who are also the possible victims of the change that is provoked, that is due to the massification of people who are arriving from other places. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think now we are getting really to a close, and I thank all the speakers for the different themes that I have proposed, and I hope that they have given some elements for the conclusion. And I would like to call Professor Bandarin for his conclusion. So, thank you. Really, thank you.
Well, it's not easy to draw any conclusion, and I think I will not, but I will perhaps try to focus on some of the issues that we have been discussing. I think you had a very complete panorama of those issues, from the over-tourism, the numbers, the development of this industry, its impact on heritage, its impact on the climate, its impact on population, on local culture. Most of the presentation were actually, trying, like we all are trying to somehow find some directions. In a way, what we're trying to discuss here is rather complex, because tourism is not one thing. It's first of all, it's it's very diverse. From place to place. Some places are overwhelmed, but many other places are not. And in fact, they're trying to attract tourism because they see the potential and the force of tourism as an economic asset. So, it's very difficult to make generalization, to generalize. But it's true that the global trend is something that has a bit escaped from any form of control. When you talk about 1.5 and then 2 billion people in a few years, you're talking about something that is clearly, has a force of its own. Now, as Jan knows very well, tourism is an industry and works on a market. And market forces can be regulated. They are regulated in modern societies. They are regulated by price. They are regulated by norms that could be very soft, open to new initiatives, but also very restrictive. It could be even rationing forces. Sometimes this happens. When you have for instance, a booking system for a flight which has a limit of numbers, like you have for instance, in American national parks, you cannot have more than such. This is a rationing force. So I think that we have, all the tools are there. And in many cases they've been experimented, they've been used, they've been tested and so on. But still, we see that the market forces are stronger for many reasons. Maybe a lack of regulation, a lack of common agreement on the directions. The ideas, they were, the situation that was shown in terms of, regulating the airlines. It was very, very clear. There is no consensus there on what to do. So, it's not an easy thing. And if we leave it as it is, we will not find this kind of balance or advanced balance that we look for forward, because the market operates for one purpose, which is profit and returns. And if this is allowed, this is there's no limitation or restriction. This will go on. I have a very interesting case in Italy where many cities are, as are a bit overwhelmed by visitors, over tourism, Airbnb. Airbnb is not a guilt. Maybe it's just it's not an evil. It's just a tool. If it wasn't for Airbnb, there would be another one. So, and in 2022, the Italian government actually passed a law that gave the mayors the ability to regulate the local housing market, so that they could, in fact, somehow moderate, the say complete substitution of the housing stock for tourist uses and protect the local population. But at the same time, we realized that the mayors were unable to do it because, in fact, the local population wanted to have the housing stock dedicated to their use. We have in Venice strict demonstrations against these rules, against the limitation of the rules, because people own the apartments and they are forced. Their forces. So of course, there are others that want the other, but at the same time, the mayor was paralyzed. So in fact, to show how difficult this is. Now, it looks a little bit like, the policies that are now being proposed and developed and pursued for climate control. Something we know that the disaster is looming. We know that the situation is very bad. We see the effects even now, and so we know what we need to do. But to go from the theory to the practice is very, very difficult. And tourism looks a little bit like that. It looks like we have clear idea what should be done. We have identified the level of balance. You talk about Jan. You talk about carrying capacity. That's a balance approach for the use of resources. At the same time, we are unable to really get an agreement and get a common, vision on how to proceed. And the reality is that the market is using this weakness not to essentially do what the market is for, which is creating opportunities for returns and profits. So I think that we need a higher level of policy making, similar to the one that is being, operated for climate change, if we want to do something that is really effective. Otherwise, we will certainly have. This year you mentioned, this year has been bigger than the year before the COVID, but we don't have the Asians. The Asians are, or less, we have much less the Asians than before. So the moment in which countries like China, the Southeast Asia, India will come into this market, we will really have a problem of substantial size. So I think that we need it at the same time to upgrade, so elevate the level of policy. There should be a global policy for these kind of things, and at the same time use the local approaches, because the local approach is fundamental to protect the local population, somehow address this issue of balancing the role of tourism into the local economy. Difficult to do, so not. And at the core of this is something that was mentioned in your discussion, was a change of behavior of people. People can change behavior for many reasons, for their own consciousness, because they have faith, because they're forced. So we have to somehow create the conditions in which the behavior changes gradually. Maybe the next generation, as you mentioned, is already carrying this objective as a part of their life. But unless we do that, at the same time as we develop policies that are regulatory and pricing policies, we will not achieve the goal of sustainability. Sustainability is a evanescent term, but I think in this case it's very clear that it's linked to a balanced approach and a balanced development of the industry. And of course, at the same time, because we are from the heritage thing, we see this with some concern, because it's true that we have the same problem. Heritage is a finite resource, reproducible up to a certain point. Only archaeologists can reproduce heritage, and maybe also Disneyland can do some work to detour people, but essentially it's a non-reproducible resource. So we have the tragedy of the common is embedded in the philosophy and the practice of heritage. So I think all together we are playing between optimism and pessimism. Sometimes people say, who is an optimist is a pessimist that is well informed. All right. So thank you very much.